My name is Norma Stone, and for most of my life, my family treated my work like it was something happening in another room. 3 weeks ago, I decided to give them one more chance. I sent a message to our family group chat saying I'd been selected to receive an International Environmental Award, that the ceremony would be live-streamed globally, and that it would mean something to me if they could be there, or at least watch. I stared at my screen, waiting. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Della responded first. She sent a laughing emoji, called it boring science stuff, and said she had her brand launch party that night. Then Larry jumped in with a joke about how awards ceremonies put people to sleep. Mom added that Della's party was a big deal for the family's image. And then Dad delivered the line that burned itself into my memory. "Don't guilt trip us about this, Norma. We have priorities." Like the culmination of 6 years of research was some inconvenient scheduling conflict I was manufacturing for attention. I read their responses 3 times. I didn't explain what the award represented, didn't mention the communities that would have clean water because of my work, didn't tell them that delegations from 12 countries would be in attendance. I just took a breath, typed 2 words, "I understand," and set my phone on my desk, screen down. That choice became the turning point. The night of the ceremony, Della's influencer party didn't prevent what unfolded next. While they posed for photos with social media personalities, my name was being announced on a live broadcast, my face appearing on the projection screens at Della's own event. And suddenly, hundreds of her guests knew exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished, long before my family ever bothered to ask. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, subscribe and let me know in the comments. You're not alone in this, and this story is for everyone who's tired of earning approval from people who refuse to see them. Now, let me take you back to how deep this pattern actually goes. Growing up in the Stone household meant learning your place in an unspoken hierarchy, and I learned mine early. Della was the star, the one whose life generated content worth discussing. Larry was the entertainer, the one whose stories always got the loudest laughs. And I was the responsible one, the one who kept things running smoothly while everyone else took center stage. Sunday dinners crystallized this dynamic perfectly. We'd gather around the table, and before the first dish was even passed, Della would launch into her latest brand partnership. Last month, it was a skincare company that wanted her to do a series of posts about authentic beauty routines. She talked for 20 minutes about ring lights and engagement metrics, while Mom hung on every word, already planning how to mention it to her book club friends. Dad would nod along, proud that his daughter had figured out how to monetize her face and personality. Then Larry would jump in with a play-by-play of his recreational league basketball game, complete with hand gestures demonstrating how he'd scored the winning basket. Never mind that it was a Thursday night league for hobbyists in their 30s. The way he told it and the way our parents received it, you'd think scouts were in the stands. Mom would beam. Dad would clap him on the shoulder and say something about natural talent running in the family. Eventually, someone would remember I was sitting there. Usually Mom, with a polite transitional question. "And how's work going, Norma?" The tone suggested she was checking a box, fulfilling her maternal duty to acknowledge all her children equally. I'd mentioned something about the water purification project, about the pilot program we were testing in 3 rural communities, about the data showing a 60% reduction in waterborne illness. Della would glance at her phone. Larry would reach for more potatoes. Dad would make a sound that could have been interest or indigestion. The conversation would drift back to Della within minutes. She'd remember something about an upcoming collaboration, or she'd need family input on which photo to post, and suddenly everyone was engaged again. Passing phones around the table, debating caption options, discussing optimal posting times like they were planning military strategy. I stopped trying to compete for attention somewhere around my 2nd year of graduate school. It wasn't worth the energy. Instead, I became useful in other ways. I was the one who remembered Dad's prescription refills and Mom's dental appointments. The one who troubleshot their technology problems and helped Larry update his resume between jobs. the one who stayed late at family gatherings to help clean up, while Della left early for some event that required her presence. Being invisible had its advantages. No one scrutinized my choices or second-guessed my decisions. But it also meant that when something genuinely remarkable happened in my life, I had no template for how my family might react. I was about to find out. The project that changed everything started with a problem most people never think about. Clean water. Turn on a tap in any American suburb and it flows, clear and safe and infinite. But in the rural communities I'd been working with for 6 years, water was a daily negotiation with risk. Boiling used fuel families couldn't afford. Bottled water cost more than food. Commercial filtration systems required electricity and maintenance that didn't exist. I'd been obsessing over this gap since my 3rd year of graduate school, running calculations in margins and testing polymer combinations in the lab until security asked me to leave for the night. The breakthrough came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself with fanfare. I'd been working with a gravity-fed design using locally sourced materials, something that could be built and maintained by the communities themselves. The test results showed 97% pathogen removal. I ran the test 4 more times, certain I'd made an error. Same results. Dr. Patricia Chin found me in the lab the next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by documentation. She was the kind of mentor who saw potential in the quietest students, who understood that groundbreaking work rarely came from the people seeking attention. She'd built her career on accessible technology for underserved populations, and she had a reputation for being ruthlessly honest about what would work in the real world versus what looked impressive in journals. She reviewed my data without speaking for what felt like an hour. Then she looked up and said something I'll never forget. "Norma, this is the kind of work that saves lives at scale. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." We spent the next 3 years refining the system, then 2 more implementing pilot programs. The first installation went into a farming community in Appalachia, where the municipal water supply had been contaminated for decades. I'll never forget watching families fill containers from the new system, seeing mothers let their children drink without that flicker of worry I'd observed during my initial research visits. One woman told me it was the first time in 8 years she hadn't boiled water before giving it to her grandson. We expanded from there. Rural communities in 3 states, then 5, then 8. The data was undeniable. Hospital visits for waterborne illness dropped by 63% in areas with our systems. The cost per household was less than a month of bottled water. Most importantly, local residents could maintain and repair the systems themselves. We'd built something that didn't require us. Dr. Chun was the one who nominated me for the International Environmental Innovation Award. She didn't tell me until after I'd been selected. When I asked her why, she said my work represented everything the award was meant to recognize. Innovation that served people instead of patents. Science that created independence instead of dependency. Impact that would compound long after I was gone. The invitation arrived on a Thursday afternoon, hand-delivered by courier to the university research building. Heavy cream cardstock in an envelope with my name written in actual calligraphy. I opened it at my desk, surrounded by the organized chaos of ongoing projects, half-drunk coffee going cold, notes from morning meetings still scattered across my keyboard. The International Environmental Innovation Award. A ceremony in New York. Black tie. Live-streamed globally across multiple platforms. My hands shook reading the details. This wasn't a departmental recognition or a regional grant acknowledgement. This was the kind of award that appeared in textbooks, the kind that changed how people perceived your entire body of work. I walked down the hall to the main lab, where my research team was prepping samples. I didn't say anything at first, just held up the invitation. Dr. Chin looked up from her microscope, read the letterhead, and her face transformed. She actually screamed. Within minutes, the entire floor knew. Colleagues I barely spoke to stopped by to congratulate me. The department had sent an email to the entire faculty. Someone ordered champagne, which felt absurd at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, but we drank it anyway from paper cups next to centrifuges and spectrometers. Dr. Chen pulled me aside during the impromptu celebration. "Your family must be over the moon," she said. I realized with a strange hollowness that I hadn't even thought to tell them yet. The people I worked with every day had been my first instinct, my immediate circle. My actual family felt like an afterthought. That evening at dinner, I mentioned it as casually as I could manage. I'd been invited to receive an international award. The ceremony would be in New York in 3 weeks. It was a significant recognition for the water project work. I watched their faces as I spoke, searching for some flicker of the reaction I'd gotten from near strangers at the lab. Della glanced up from her phone long enough to say, "That's nice," before returning to her screen. She was in crisis mode about some influencer drama, something about another content creator copying her aesthetic. Mom made an interested sound but was clearly distracted, mentally planning something else. Larry asked if the ceremony served food, then laughed like it was a joke when no one else responded. Dad was the only one who engaged, but even that felt perfunctory. "Good for you, honey. What kind of award?" When I started explaining the significance, the selection process, the previous recipients whose work had shaped entire fields, I watched his attention drift. He nodded in the right places, but I could tell he was just waiting for an opening to redirect the conversation. Della found it for him. She'd resolved her influencer crisis and needed family input on whether her brand launch party should have a champagne wall or a signature cocktail station. The table came alive with opinions. I finished my dinner in silence, the invitation still in my bag, suddenly feeling heavier than cardstock should. Now, before I tell you about the night everything changed, take 2 seconds to subscribe. Because what happens when that ceremony goes live is going to make you want to rewatch this entire thing. The pieces are all in place. Let me show you what happened next. The week before the ceremony, I went shopping for something appropriate to wear. Black tie wasn't a dress code I encountered often in laboratory settings. I found myself in a department store, overwhelmed by options, eventually selecting a simple navy gown that felt elegant without trying too hard. The saleswoman told me it photographed well, which seemed important for an event being live-streamed internationally, though the concept still felt surreal. At home, I hung the dress in my closet and tried not to think about it too much. In 3 days, I'd be on a stage in New York, accepting recognition for work that had consumed 6 years of my life. The reality should have felt enormous, but in the Stone household, it barely registered as a blip. Della had commandeered the entire living room for her party planning operation. Her brand launch event had evolved into something that required spreadsheets, vendor contracts, and apparently a level of logistical coordination usually reserved for small weddings. She'd hired an event coordinator who called the house at all hours with urgent questions about aesthetic choices. I was in my room the night before I was supposed to leave for New York, reviewing my acceptance speech, when Della's voice carried through the wall. She was on another call with her coordinator, pacing in the hallway, her tone veering between excited and frantic. "No, the red carpet needs to be longer. I want people to feel like they're arriving somewhere important," she was saying. "And confirm the photographer situation again. I need someone who understands influencer events, not just someone who shoots corporate headshots." I tried to focus on my notes. Dr. Chen had encouraged me to speak about the communities we'd served, to make the award about impact rather than achievement. But Della's voice kept breaking through. "The signature cocktail should be on brand. Something with my color palette. Can we do a blue drink? Like aqua blue." A pause. "Perfect. And the screens. You confirm the screens are huge, right? I want the live stream display to be impossible to miss." The screens for her live stream. The thought occurred to me with dark irony that Della's party decorations would likely be more elaborate than the award ceremony itself. Her event coordinator was probably managing more details than the organization running an international environmental summit. Wait, what about the surprise guest? Della's pitch had risen. "You're sure they confirmed? This could be huge for my following. Like, Career-defining huge. I closed my laptop. Career-defining. The phrase rattled around in my head. Tomorrow I'd be recognized for work that provided clean water to thousands of families. Tonight, my sister was 3 rooms away, treating a brand launch party like it was the apex of human achievement. And somehow, in our family's logic, her event was the one that demanded everyone's attendance and attention. I folded my speech notes and set them in my bag next to my plane ticket. In less than 24 hours, I'd be gone. They'd never even asked what time my flight was leaving. The ceremony venue was the kind of place that made you whisper instinctively. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with portraits of previous award recipients whose work had shaped environmental policy for generations. I arrived early, my navy gown feeling suddenly inadequate despite the saleswoman's assurances. Other recipients milled around in clusters, speaking in low voices about their research, their projects, the communities they served. Dr. Chen found me near the registration table, looking slightly lost. She was wearing a burgundy dress I'd never seen her in before, her usual lab practicality replaced with an elegance that reminded me she'd attended dozens of these events over her career. "You belong here," she said quietly, reading my face. "Don't forget that." The ballroom filled gradually. Delegates from 12 countries, representatives from environmental organizations, researchers whose papers I'd cited in my own work. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically. The live stream setup was professional but unobtrusive, just enough to capture the moment without turning it into spectacle. Everything felt measured, dignified, focused on the work rather than the performance of recognition. 300 miles away, Della's brand launch party was reaching full chaos. Mom had sent photos to the family group chat, the kind of overeager documentation that suggested she was treating this as her own social currency. The venue Della had rented was a converted warehouse in the trendy part of downtown, transformed into something that looked like a nightclub had merged with a lifestyle magazine photo shoot. The red carpet Della had obsessed over stretched 20 feet from the entrance, lined with ring lights and backdrop displays featuring her logo, her brand colors, her face repeated in artistic patterns. Influencers I vaguely recognized from Della's phone screen arrived in coordinated outfits, posing for photographers who called out directions like they were shooting for Vogue. Inside, the space pulsed with music and colored lights. The signature aqua cocktails Della had agonized over were being served in glasses with her brand name etched into them. Everywhere you looked, screens displayed her content, her metrics, her aesthetic carefully curated to suggest aspirational living. The crowd was young, beautiful, performatively enthusiastic. Everyone seemed to be filming everything. Larry had stationed himself near the bar, already working on his third drink, entertaining a group with his basketball story that got more impressive with each retelling. Dad was in networking mode, introducing himself to people as Della's father, clearly enjoying the proximity to her manufactured glamour. Mom was taking photos from every angle, her phone never lowering. The main screens that dominated the space were cycling through Della's highlight reels, her best content, testimonials from other influencers about her authentic brand voice. The event coordinator had positioned them perfectly for maximum visual impact, impossible to ignore from anywhere in the room. None of them had checked their phones. None of them knew that in a ballroom in New York, my name had just been called. I was halfway through my acceptance speech when it happened, though I wouldn't know the details until much later. I was speaking about the families in Appalachia, about the woman who'd told me her grandson could finally drink water without fear, about how innovation meant nothing if it didn't serve the people who needed it most. The ballroom was quiet except for my voice and the subtle whir of cameras. Dr. Chen was in the front row, her eyes bright with something that looked like pride. At Della's party, the event coordinator made a decision that would fracture everything. Later, when I pieced together what happened, I learned she'd been monitoring the live stream on her tablet. Curious about the boring science thing Della had mocked in the family chat she'd been accidentally added to. She'd watched my name appear on her screen, Watch the camera pan across the distinguished audience. Watch the crawl at the bottom identify me as the recipient of one of the most prestigious environmental awards in the world. Whether it was spite, curiosity, or a sense of cosmic justice, she switched the feed. The screens throughout Della's party, the massive displays that had been cycling through her curated content, suddenly cut to a live broadcast. My face, 10 feet tall, appeared above the crowd. My voice, amplified through the venue's sound system, began speaking over the party music about water purification and underserved communities. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Influencers lowered their phones. Someone near the DJ booth shouted to turn down the music. Within seconds, hundreds of people were staring at screens showing me in my navy gown, standing at a podium with the award seal behind me, clearly at an event far more significant than anyone in that room had imagined. Mom saw it first. She'd been photographing a cocktail display when the screens changed, and her phone captured the exact moment of transition. Della's brand content replaced by her sister's face. She made a sound, something between a gasp and a cry, loud enough that Dad turned from his conversation. Larry actually dropped his drink.
Della frase.
She was near the main screen, mid-conversation with a fashion influencer who'd been complimenting her aesthetic vision. The words died in her throat as she looked up and saw me, saw the formal setting, saw the text crawling across the bottom of the screen listing my credentials and the significance of the award. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, then something I'd never seen from her. Before that might have been shame. The party didn't stop exactly, but it fractured. Groups formed around the screens. People pulled out their phones, searching my name, finding articles about the water project, discovering that the invisible sister was apparently newsworthy after all. Someone near my family said, loud enough to carry, "Wait, that's your daughter? The environmental scientist? That's incredible." Dad's face turned red. Mom looked like she might cry. My phone was in my clutch, silenced for the ceremony, so I didn't see the messages as they arrived. I was at a reception following the award presentation, speaking with a delegate from Kenya about adapting the purification system for different regional needs, when my phone started vibrating with the persistence of an emergency. I excused myself and checked the screen. 43 text messages. 17 missed calls. All from my family, all sent within the last 20 minutes. The family group chat had exploded. Mom's messages came in frantic bursts, each one more effusive than the last. "Norma, we are so proud of you," followed by, "Everyone here is talking about your award, and then why didn't you tell us it was such a big deal?" The irony of that last question was apparently lost on her. Della had sent a series of increasingly desperate private messages. "OMG, Norma, your speech is playing at my party. Then people are asking why we're not there. Then can you call me please? This is important." Important. The word choice was remarkable. My award had become important the moment it affected her image. Larry's contribution was briefer, but equally transparent. "Dude, that's actually really cool what you do. We should talk about it more. We should talk about it more." As if the opportunity hadn't been available at every single family dinner for the past 6 years. Dad's message attempted authority. "Norma, call me when you can. We need to discuss how to handle the media attention. This reflects on the whole family." The whole family. Suddenly my work was a collective achievement to be managed rather than an individual accomplishment to be dismissed. But the messages were just the beginning. Mom had already posted on Facebook a glowing tribute about her brilliant daughter, complete with a photo she must have screenshot from the live stream. So, incredibly proud of Norma tonight receiving this amazing honor. She's always been so dedicated to helping others. #ProudMom, #environmental science, #changing the world. The post had 74 comments in 15 minutes, friends congratulating her on raising such an accomplished daughter. Della's Instagram story was even more calculated. She'd posted the live stream screenshot with text overlay, when your sister is literally changing the world and receiving international recognition. So proud I could cry. Family first always. The performance of sisterly pride from someone who'd called the ceremony stupid 3 weeks ago was almost artistic in its shamelessness. Her followers were eating it up, comments flooding in about family bonds and supporting each other's dreams. I stood in the corridor outside the reception, watching their revisionist history unfold in real time. They were rewriting the narrative as fast as they could type, transforming from the family who couldn't be bothered to attend into the family who'd always believed in me, always supported my work, always known I was destined for greatness. My finger hovered over the reply button. Dr. Chen appeared at my elbow, took one look at my face, and quietly asked if I was all right. I showed her the messages. She read them without expression, then looked at me with the same clarity she brought to evaluating research data. "What do you want to do?" she asked. For the first time all night, I smiled. I didn't respond that night. I turned my phone face down, returned to the reception, and spent the rest of the evening talking with people who understood what the work actually meant. I took photos with other recipients, exchanged contact information with researchers doing similar projects in different contexts, listened to Dr. Chen tell stories about previous ceremonies. I let myself exist in a space where I was genuinely seen, not suddenly convenient. The next morning, from my hotel room overlooking Manhattan, I finally opened my laptop and composed a response. Not to the group chat, not to the individual messages, but a single email sent to all of them with a subject line that simply read, "Boundaries." I wrote it the way I'd write a research proposal. Clear, factual, unemotional. I received your messages. I understand there's been a shift in how you perceive my work now that other people have validated it publicly. I want to be direct about what happens next. I will not be participating in any social media narratives about our family's pride or support. Mom, I'd appreciate it if you take down your Facebook post. Della, the same goes for your Instagram story. What you're presenting publicly doesn't reflect the reality of what happened, and I won't be part of rewriting that history for your audiences. I will not be doing any joint interviews, family photo opportunities, or public appearances where my achievement is framed as a collective family success. This award represents 6 years of work that you showed no interest in understanding until strangers decided it was impressive. I'm not angry, and I'm not trying to punish anyone. But I'm also not interested in pretending the last 3 weeks didn't happen the way they happened. You made a choice about what mattered to you. I'm making a choice about what matters to me. If you'd like to have a genuine relationship with me moving forward, one where you're actually interested in my work rather than what my work does for your image, I'm open to that conversation. But it needs to be real, not performative, not for an audience. I'll be back in town next week. We can talk then if you'd like, but only if you're willing to be honest about the pattern we've all been pretending doesn't exist. I read it twice before sending, making sure the tone stayed firm without tipping into cruelty. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to let my accomplishment become another prop in the family performance, another storyline they could exploit without actually engaging with the substance of who I was or what I cared about. The response came within minutes. Multiple responses, actually overlapping and contradictory. Mom insisting I was being unfair. Della claiming she'd always been supportive. Did I not remember that one time she asked about my research? Larry saying I was overreacting. Dad attempting to frame my email as disrespectful, as if respect was something owed regardless of behavior. I read them all. Then I muted the group chat, archived the individual threads, and went downstairs to meet Dr. Chen for breakfast. This is the moment when you stop asking for permission to value yourself. If that resonates with you, subscribe to this channel and join a community that celebrates choosing yourself over performance. Drop a comment if you've ever had to set a boundary like this. Now, let me show you what recognition actually looks like when it comes from the right people. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I drove out to one of our earliest installation sites in rural Virginia. The community had been dealing with contaminated well water for over a decade before we'd implemented the purification system. I hadn't visited in 6 months, too consumed with preparation for newer projects and, if I was honest, the award process itself. The project coordinator, a woman named Teresa who'd become essential to maintaining the systems across the region, met me at the community center. She didn't know about the award or the family drama or any of it. She just knew we had quarterly data to review and several families who'd asked to speak with me about expanding the system to neighboring areas. We spent the morning walking through the installation sites, checking metrics, documenting maintenance patterns. The systems were functioning exactly as designed. Better, actually. The community had made small improvements we hadn't anticipated, adaptations that reflected their specific needs and resources. This was the part of the work that textbooks couldn't capture, the way solutions evolved when you trusted the people using them to understand what they actually needed. At the third house, a woman named Marie invited us in for coffee. Her grandson, the one she'd worried about for years, was now 7. Healthy. Thriving. She showed me a school photo with pride that felt nothing like my mother's Facebook performance. This was pride rooted in relief, in the simple, profound gift of not having to worry anymore about something as basic as water. "You changed our lives," Marie said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "I know that probably sounds dramatic for something like a water filter, but you really did." I started to deflect, to explain it was a team effort, a collaboration with the community, but Teresa cut me off. "Let her thank you, Norma. This is what the work is for." By afternoon, we'd gathered at the community center for a larger meeting. Families who'd been using the systems, local officials interested in expansion, volunteers who'd been trained in maintenance. Someone had brought a cake, homemade, with "Thank you, Dr. Stone," written in slightly crooked icing. It was more meaningful than any formal ceremony could be. They asked questions about the award when Teresa mentioned it in passing. I showed them photos from the ceremony on my phone. They wanted to know about the other recipients, the international delegates, whether our project might be adapted for communities in other countries. Their questions were curious, engaged, about the substance rather than the spectacle. Driving home that evening, I thought about the contrast. My family's sudden interest once strangers validated my work. This community's steady gratitude for what the work actually accomplished. One was about appearance, about reflected glory, about narrative control. The other was about impact, about real change in real lives, about seeing people clearly enough to serve them well. I'd spent 28 years trying to earn recognition from people who'd never learned to see me. I'd finally stopped trying. And in that space, I'd found something better than their approval. I'd found my own,